It's
Call is
Okay, you're good, Desiree. All
okay.
right, everybody.
Okay, can I get everybody's attention, please? I'm Desiree Michaeliski. I work closely with the famous Josh Zuniga. He is a highly accomplished salesman. You're also, oh, Sean's calling me. He's a leader, entrepreneur, and the founder of Zunex Pest Control and Toro Marketing. Over the course of his 13 years sales career, Josh has demonstrated an exceptional ability to drive results, leading by example and inspiring others to achieve their best. He is widely recognized for his record-breaking summer, personally selling 1,500 accounts, a testament to his discipline, work ethic, and mastery of sales strategy. Beyond his achievements, Josh is deeply passionate about using business as a tool for personal growth and helping others unlock their potential as well. He loves working alongside his family, blending his professional pursuits with his values of loyalty, service, and integrity. Today, Josh will share the principles, insights, and strategies that propelled his success, offering a roadmap for anyone striving to excel in sales and leadership. We get a warm welcome to Josh Zuniga.
Thank you, everybody. And yes, that was created by ChatGPT. So, although all those things are true, I don't think I would have been able to articulate it that well. Okay, so a lot of people in there. Well, love you too, Noah. Well, that's my son. I know most of you. A couple of you guys I've met for the first time today. And I don't know who all is watching on this, but Desiree's right. One of the things that I'm most well known for is this summer that I had in 2019. And the record that I broke, it's been broken since then, which it's fine. Took me a moment to kind of get over that. It did bother me initially because I'm competitive, but the unique aspect of my story is how I did it and what I was like beforehand. When I first started selling pest control, I started pretty normally. It wasn't one of those things where I came in and sold 500, 600 accounts year one. It wasn't like that for me. And a lot of times people that win golden doors year after year after year, a lot of time they kind of stepped into the arena and they just start crushing it right away. So for me, it wasn't like that. My first year, I sold just under 150 accounts. So nothing super crazy, right? Just enough for me to be able to take girls out on dates while I was going to school at BYU and not bother my parents too much when it came to money. Can we have Noah go upstairs? Sorry, guys. I love my son, but just getting a little bit distracted. Anyways, so yeah, year one, I sold 150 accounts, did decent, enough to not really have to focus on much else other than school. Enough for me to want to do it again. So I did it again. In year two, I sold roughly 220 accounts, a modest increase. Year three, I started early, so I sold just under 400 accounts, and I sold in Nashville that year. One cool thing about that year is we won the Altera Cup that year. For those of you guys who know Altera, as you guys are OGs, because Altera doesn't exist anymore. It's known as Active now. But from there, honestly, things didn't get better. Things kind of relatively stayed the same. I bounced between 200 to 300 accounts over the course of the next couple of years. So basically from year one to year five, I was good. But the truth is it was also pretty average. Like there's a lot of sales reps that sell between 200 to 300 accounts. And it's not really anything to write home about. It's enough to not have to focus on anything else the rest of the year, but not enough really to be brag worthy. So, but the year before I broke the record, I had a really, really bad year, both personally and professionally. So I'd gotten into a place in my life where at this point I dropped out of school And I recognized that school to me really kind of just felt like a box that I had to break out of, because if I stayed in it, what would happen is I would have to work for somebody else for the foreseeable future. And I just couldn't see myself. I just couldn't see myself doing that. It's not out of like a desire to not work for others or work hard, but more so like out of a fear of not being able to live up to other people's expectations of me for forever. So it really just kind of freaked me out. So as soon as I started making $90,000 a year, I dropped out of college immediately. My parents cried and were super worried about it. But then I started up, was a partner in a branch of Urban called for a company called UrbanX in Oklahoma City. And I was there for 5 years. So 4 years in, that's when I had like this really big moment. And it all started for me being the lowest I'd ever been. I had gotten engaged that summer, and the engagement fell through, which, to be candid with you guys, I'm really glad it did, because it would not have worked out at all. Like, we did not truly love one another. But I was at a place where I really wanted to be loved. Like, I wanted that kind of connection. I wanted to be supported. But I still don't feel like I truly knew who I was yet. I still had a hole inside of me. I know that all of this might not sound relevant to sales, but I promise you it'll get to it. Okay. So essentially, I remember this moment, the summer before it happening, where I was in my car driving around, and I was in between areas. I was knocking, and I was trying to come up with reasons why I didn't want to knock. And the reason that I gave myself was that I was going to go and shadow some of my other sales reps and provide value to them, essentially using leadership as a shield and an excuse not to have to give an all-out effort in leading from the front. At the time, I don't think I fully recognized that that's what it was that I was trying to avoid. In hindsight, I do. But in the moment, I just knew that I felt a lot of anxiety to perform, anxiety with the situation that I was in, because truthfully, I didn't think that my life was going to get any better, and I didn't like it. I didn't like my life. I didn't like that year after year I was doing the same thing, getting relatively the same amount of the same results, and there was just no progression. No progression. And for those of you who are thinking, well, you were a partner in a branch. Yes, I was, but I think a lot of people don't fully understand how long it takes for those branches to become profitable. So even though I was 4 years in, I still hadn't seen a dime from the previous year's efforts. And I was just stuck. I remember having panic attacks and asking myself, is this really what my life is? And at the time, I didn't really have an answer. So I kind of just, the panic attack eventually left. I continued on with the rest of the summer, and it kind of tanked. Like, I only sold around 150 accounts that year. Then we had a leadership retreat where I was the only person. We went to Hawaii, and I was pretty out of shape at that point. I remember I was the only person that wasn't able to make it to the top of the hike. I puked halfway up. And dude, I was so ashamed. Like, really, guys, like, there were pregnant moms that were hoofing it up this hike. And here I am, like, I don't even know how old I was at the time, maybe 24. Like, I should be in the prime of my life, and I can't even make it to to the top of this hike. And I just had this moment where I sat down after I'd thrown up. I had like throw up on my face, like in my beard. And I'm just sitting there disgusted with myself, thinking to myself, what the hell is my problem? Like, what is my problem? Why have I let myself go? I realized that if I can't even control what I put into my mouth, I can't control what I do with my body. Like, if I can't force myself to go up this hike, then what am I doing? I found myself at a rock bottom where I don't know how to explain how I felt in any other way other than I felt despair, and really just like a black hole. Like, I was just stuck in this black hole. But I didn't think that I was like totally hopeless. I had like a flicker of hope, a flicker of hope, like maybe it was like this big, that I could make some changes in my life. So the honest truth, though, is that I was afraid. I was afraid of trying because I didn't want to let myself down. So it honestly kind of made more sense to me to just not try for, and I think that that's why I spent the majority of my early 20s wasting time. Because the truth is, I could have earned significantly more golden doors than I did. I only earned one. I only earned one, and I know for a fact that I had the skill set to be able to do it 5 or 6 times. I mean, over a period of 11 years of knocking, I should have done it multiple times, but I just wasted my time. I really did. I wasted my time, and I never truly engaged or looked myself in the mirror and asked myself, what am I made of? So it wasn't until I couldn't look away from that I decided to really think about it. So I decided to really think about it, and I'm going to kind of go over to this board. I became a little bit more self-aware. I was aware of my inefficiencies and my inadequacies this whole entire time, but I started to increase my self-awareness, and that took a lot of honesty. So the number one step to me becoming a 1500 level rep, it really had nothing to do with my own ability to sell or not sell or have a specific type of clothes or anything like that. It really was all in my head. You know, there's a lot of companies that preach practicing over and over and over and over again. And I do believe that. I believe in mastering your craft. I do. But something that some people have been surprised to find out about is when I tell them how much I practiced during that off season. And the truth is I didn't practice at all. I didn't practice a single close. I didn't practice anything. All of it, all of this going from 300 to 1500 was all in my mind, and really reframing how I perceived my own effort and what effort means to me. So I decided to get brutally honest, and I realized that there was a pretty large gap between what I knew I was truly capable of and what it was that I was actually doing on a day in and day out basis. It was pretty large. So let me ask you guys this, because I don't want to just preach to you guys the whole entire time. How many of you guys know that there's a gap between what you can do and what you choose to do every single day? I want you guys to be really honest about it. This doesn't have to be directly tied to sales, but it does need to be tied to something that's measurable and you can progress in. So I want you guys to pull out your phones, okay? For people watching, I also want you to do this. I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. And I want you to visualize something. Okay, I want you guys to visualize this idealized version of yourself. Who it is that you want to become. What is it that they would do? What actions would they take? What actions would they take on a regular day-to-day basis? Okay, so I want you to think about the end destination. Like, who is it that you know that you can be? Attached to the gap, I'm asking you guys to see and visualize what's on the other side of this gap between what you do and what you should be doing. Okay, and ask yourselves, what should I be doing? What would that best version of myself actually be doing day in, day out, as it pertains to whatever it is that you want to progress in, whether that's sales or fitness or school. This is something that can be applied to anything. Okay. So write some stuff down. Let me give you guys like a minute or two. Got a text from Sean saying that there's people that are wanting to join.
I don't see any queue.
I know we're taking some time to do this, but if you guys don't pull anything actionable out of the story, then it's just a story. So I want you guys to think about it. You finding anybody else that's trying to join? Bigger?
I don't see a queue anywhere. I'm still looking though. I'll keep looking.
How many people are on right now?
20, minus 2.
Okay.
So 18.
Yeah, I'll give you guys 30 more seconds.
I'm clicking admit to everyone that asked to join. Because I can't find anywhere to just have it allow them to join.
Okay.
Found it. Opened. They can just dial in now.
Did anybody else get added in?
Yeah, anyone that clicks on the link now should be able to. It was set on trusted, so if you had to allow everybody that clicked the link
Okay.
manually, but now it should work.
Okay, so right now, for people that are just now joining, we're going over, and you guys are asking yourselves, you guys are thinking about the gap, essentially where you're at now versus where you should be in whatever aspect of life you feel like that gap is the biggest in, whether it's faith, fitness, work. For me, in this instance, it was fitness. That's what it was. Now, there is one fundamental aspect of this, of fitness, that worked for me that won't work for somebody else. The key to this, the whole key to this is not just going to the gym, realizing that you can lose weight and magically you're going to have the discipline to sell 1,500 pounds. It just doesn't work that way. There's a specific aspect of this that is very, very important. And the aspect that I'm talking about is you need to get used to doing something that you specifically do not like to do. That's it. You have to exercise a muscle in your brain where you force yourself to do something that gives you a little bit of anxiety, makes you a little bit nervous to do it, and you just outright don't want to do it. I hate exercise. There's not a single, there's nothing in this world that'll ever change me disliking cardio. I hate it. I hate it. I don't enjoy lifting. If there was one I had to choose, I would say it was lifting, but ultimately, I don't like it. If I could push a button and just have big muscles, I would do that all day, every day. Doesn't work like that, though. You know, progression is given to us at the cost of effort and intention. So I remember visualizing this and figuring out in my head, what is the gap? If I was to do my very best at something, and right now, at this point in my story, I'm not thinking about sales. Essentially, I'm thinking about the best version of Josh as it relates to fitness. I don't know. I don't know if Josh would crush every single workout from day one. But what I do know is that this idealized version of myself that I'm chasing would give his best effort, regardless of what the outcome was and how I felt about it. In fact, he would do it regardless of how he felt about it. Whether I was happy, sad, tired, I would just do it. And because that step is something that's within my control to do, just the fact of doing it, I decided, you know what? That's something I can control. That's something I can hold on to. That's something actionable that nobody could take away from me. So I decided to do it. I hired a fitness coach for a year, and I ordered enough like prepackaged meal prep. And this is, guys, I did not have a lot of money when I did this. But I ordered enough meal prep food that I could not afford to eat out. That was essentially what I did. So the principle behind that is I kind of forced myself into this position where if I kind of deviated, number one, it would have hurt me financially, and I wouldn't have been able to. Essentially, I put myself in a position where I couldn't fail. I couldn't fall back on other things because I just didn't have the money to do it. So you can take from that what you want. It's kind of like a burning the bridges or burning the ships type of situation. And that's what I chose to do. So I was brutally honest, recognized I was out of shape. And although I can't control how long it takes, or if I even have the self-discipline it takes to stick to something long term, I decided I was going to take it one day at a time. One day at a time. Around this time, I start to learn about this story called Sisyphus. I don't know if you guys know who Sisyphus is. Do any of you guys know who Sisyphus is? Not surprised Dave here does. Who is Sisyphus?
He's a man who was cursed to push a rock up a hill.
Yep. He was a man that was cursed to push a rock up a hill. For how long?
Eternity.
What happens to the rock when he gets to the top of the hill?
Visuals back and
It always rolls back down. Sounds like it sucks, honestly. It does not sound like a good time at all. But I was listening to a podcast where Dr. Willink was talking. He was talking about Sisyphus. He's just like a leadership guru type of guy. He's a Navy SEAL dude. Super cool guy. He wrote a book called Discipline Equals Freedom, amongst many other books. But the story of Sisyphus, in a lot of ways, if you look at it the way that it was intended originally, it could be looked at as a story of futility. Of no matter how much effort you put in, this rock, even if you get to the top, it's going to come all the way back down. The way that I decided to look at it was through a different lens. I view my inaction in life, my stagnation, my plateau as my natural state. If I don't do if I'm not engaged in trying to better myself or engaged in some effort of progression, I am not happy, for one, and I'm not actively pushing this rock. What the rock represents, it represents effort. It represents leaning into this pursuit of your best self, this idealized visualization of yourself. At the top is perfection. It's arrival. And the truth is, we will never arrive. Not in this life. I believe that from the theological perspective and I think it's based in reality. We're never going to be perfect. Not in this life. So throughout the story of the summer, or throughout the story of this off season, a couple of different things happened. The number one obstacle I had to overcome was fear of effort. How many of you guys have known everything that I'm already talking about? That there's a gap between what you should do and what you do. How many of you guys already knew that there's a gap? Why don't you guys fix it? Why don't you guys do it?
laziness.
Laziness, hard. What else?
Takes
It takes time. It takes forever, actually.
You have a set of ambitions that,
What were you gonna say, Jaeger?
you have a set of inhibitions that don't allow you to do exactly what you want to. You have to force yourself past those inhibitions that are your natural state.
Yeah, you do. What were you gonna say, Isaiah?
I think it requires a lot of sacrifice.
It does. It does require a lot of sacrifice.
Hard.
Yep. For me, my number one obstacle was this fear of failure. Like, this is something that was very deeply rooted. It's not a surface level thing for me. It's this fear. And I think that, like, as I've gotten older, in hindsight, I've been able to kind of dissect this and look back. A lot of this stems from childhood trauma that I went through because I had ADD as a child, and adults weren't very kind to me because I would annoy them, even though I didn't realize I was annoying them. So just because I couldn't sit still, I couldn't sit still within a box of expectations that they wanted me to fit into. It had nothing to do with my desire to be good or bad. I was just confused. But ultimately, that's where my fear of failure and my fear of being able to be in a box or give consistent effort for like a vague amount of time or a forever amount of time really scared the crap out of me. I did not believe in myself. I did not believe in myself at the beginning of that year. I really, really didn't, guys. There was a flicker of hope that I could make changes and lasting changes. But the truth is, in order for me to be successful, I kind of had to reframe in my mind what it was that success is. Success isn't perfection. We're not chasing perfection. We're not chasing this mirage of who I am supposed to be in my head. What I am chasing, though, I'm chasing actions and I'm chasing the process. I'm chasing being brave enough to put in the effort and recognizing that there's no finality in this. It really is just me pushing against the rock, and me pushing against the rock and giving my best effort, regardless of how I feel about it. That is success. Now, rather than speaking in platitudes and vague, like philosophical stuff, I'll break it down to like what I actually mean by this. So as I started going to the gym, I told myself, you know what? I can't control anything other than my efforts. So I'm going to give my very best effort day in and day out. I was pretty out of shape. And so for the first couple of weeks, I would get sick as I began to work out. I would throw up occasionally during my workout or after my workout. I finally got to a place where I got beyond that. And that was a nice relief. That was like a little check in my head of progression. Then I kept going another 2 weeks. I didn't really notice anything super different. Okay, I lost like 2 pounds on the scale, or however much weight it was, maybe 5 pounds. It was like a normal amount of weight to lose for a month worth of work. And I remember thinking, wow, that really sucked. And that was not that much weight I lost. At that point, I hadn't totally reframed it in a positive way in my head. But I kept pushing forward because just holding on to this idea that my success is only based in my effort. I kept going, another month passes. And then I start to notice something within me. I don't recognize it for what it is quite yet, but there's this feeling that I start to feel. There's this feeling that I start to feel as I continue to push myself and get to a place where I'm getting more and more comfortable pushing this rock as hard as I possibly can. I begin to recognize that this idea in my head of me being happy once I reached a certain weight goal wasn't really where I was finding happiness. I actually recognized that I was feeling happy, but I did recognize it for what it was. Happiness is an emotion. It's an emotion that really it can't be depended on for you to do this. Happiness cannot be dependent on you to do this and push this rock. Happiness comes as a byproduct of you pushing this rock. And happiness comes from an understanding that you given your very best, it can't be taken from you. And just an understanding that you can trust yourself to say that you're going to do something and then do it. That in and of itself is something that's palpable, something that is rock solid, that you can build a lot of things off of. So I keep going, another month, and all of a sudden I look totally different. I go a couple of points up on the 10-point scale as far as how good looking I was. The kind of girls that I'm talking to on Tinder, sorry, Caitlin, my wife. The kind of girls that I'm talking to on Tinder are also a couple of points higher on the 10-point scale. Not that anything really happened from that, but because I was focused. I was focused on getting ready to sell. But essentially, I was feeling pretty good. At this point, I recognized something very deep within me. I had learned this eternal truth, something that I knew was true, in that I'm in control of my life. That if I have a goal, if I understand that there's a gap, and I'm honest with myself, I can visualize who it is I want to be. I can visualize what that person's doing, what that version of me is doing, and I can do the math backwards. What would that person do? What would that person think about certain scenarios? I did my very best to align my actions with the actions of this perfected version of myself, with an understanding that I'm not trying to chase or become perfect. I'm just trying to become my best. So I'm not getting hung up on the gap between where I'm at and what I'm trying to do. My main focus is in pushing this rock as hard as I possibly can. And I recognize that as long as I'm engaged with that rock, as long as I'm engaged in doing my best, that I can do things I didn't even think I could do. I need you guys to understand that for the majority of my adult life, I never thought I would lose weight. I just was this idea in my head that I didn't have the self-discipline to work out for any long periods of time, like months or years. I just assumed that I was going to keep gaining weight slowly and slowly and slowly. That was really what I thought. As sad as that is to admit, that is the truth of what I thought. And so for me, understanding this, it changed my life. It changed my life in a way where I was like, wow, I have not applied this in other areas of my life. Number one being sales. So I decided that I would do that. So that's what I went into that next summer thinking about myself. I had this idea in my head that if I chase after this idealized version of myself, and I just give my best effort, and the way that I'm quantifying my success is more through my inputs than these outputs. So remember, I'm not focused on my weight loss goal anymore. I'm focused on doing the actionable things that are in my control. Going to the gym, sticking to my meal plan, things like that, things that I can actually control in my day-to-day. I realized if I do that door to door, what could I do? I knew I had friends that had sold 1,000 accounts before. And deep down, I actually did believe that I was pretty good at sales. I knew that I could be depended on in any situation. Like if there was a competition happening, I was always that guy that you could count on to sell 10 to 12 accounts that day. The next day, you couldn't count on me for crap, but you could count on me to show up when it came time for competitions. I don't know how many of you guys can relate to that, where you know that you can have a big day, whether that's 5 or 6 accounts or whatever that is to you, but then you kind of fluctuate the rest of the week. For me, that was up until this point, that was my whole career. That was my whole career. It is just like this up and down. I'll sometimes push the rock, but I can never continually try to push the rock. So I decided it's time for me to do that. So I started talking with my partner at the time, and I told him what my plan was. His initial response was not to believe me. Just to be honest with you guys, he's like, Josh, you need to sell 500 accounts first before you sell 1,500 accounts or 1,000 accounts. At the time, my goal was 1,000 accounts. I wasn't thinking 1,500 accounts at that time. And at that point, I'm like, well, I'm going to show you. You're not going to tell me I can or can't do something. I'm just going to do it. So I decided that from the months of March to October, I was going to push this rock as hard as I effing could for as long as I effing could. And I attacked it and pushed that rock with prejudice. It was me against me. I wanted to see exactly what I was made of. What is it? What's going to happen on the other side of my best efforts? Do any of you guys feel like you know? What's on the other side of your very best effort when it comes to sales? If you guys feel like you found that, you can be honest. If you feel like you haven't found that, raise your hands. So why not? The time between the beginning of the summer and the end of the summer is going to pass, regardless of what you choose to do during that time. It will. Time is a thief, and it's going to keep going regardless of what you choose to do. Now, for those in leadership positions, I know that there's a lot of excuses that we can make to shield ourselves from giving our best effort. I know because I was one of the best at making them. I can talk a little bit more about that, about my thoughts on leadership when you're leading from the front and trying your very best to sell as many as you possibly can, because there is some nuance that is required in that type of situation in order for you to lead in a way where people don't look at you and say that you're selfish. Because there are a lot of golden door reps in this industry who people work with them. They have this idea that if they work with them and they're on their team, that they're going to sell a golden door. And then they find out that that person's actually just really selfish and doesn't care about them. They just wanted them on their team so they can make an override. And now they're just doing their own thing and they really don't get the time that they were maybe getting in the off season. Have you guys heard stories like that? So there is some like meat and potatoes there when it comes to leadership and leading from the front that I'm happy to share. Somebody will probably have to remind me of it after I get to the end of the story. But I'll tell you guys this, I did not just go to Oklahoma in March, the very beginning of March, and it wasn't like flipping a light switch and all of a sudden I was just on the whole time. It didn't work like that for me. I had to fight tooth and nail pretty much every week to remind myself to be engaged in this process. Like, getting a golden door isn't necessarily something that's as rare today as it used to be. When I won it at the time, it still was relatively uncommon. For me, like I was saying before, the reason why my story is unique isn't because of the fact I won a golden door, but it's because of where I was at a base level prior to me winning it. In a lot of ways, I pulled myself up from the bootstraps and completely changed the trajectory of my life. I'll tell you guys that this lesson, this eternal truth of understanding that I'm in control and that pushing the rock is the key to lasting happiness. It's changed my life forever. It's changed how I look at myself forever. And when you decide to engage in this and not look away from yourself, and you do this for a long enough period of time, you will start to accomplish things in your life that you never thought that you could do. You never expected that yourself would do. So when I first got to Oklahoma, it was freezing cold. There was a cold snap that had just happened. And I also happened to get the flu right before I got there. And so when I'm there, I'm sicker than a dog and the ground is covered in frost and snow. All the ponds that are normally like not frozen are frozen. And I spent this whole off season with this idea that it's really just about pushing the rock and me getting my best effort out of myself. But in my head, when I get there, I'm like, wow, it's really cold. It'd probably be better for me to just wait, get over this sickness for a couple of days, and then begin. That was my first thought. And honestly, it was a thought that I had for a little bit, like maybe a couple hours. But then I thought back to myself, the visualization. Somebody that's going to open a golden door, what would they do? What do you guys think they would do in that situation?
Drink some Dayquil and knock.
Drink some Dayquil and knock. Yes, they would. Even if it's really cold outside, why would I want to knock even if it's cold outside? Understand, applying the framework I'm teaching you guys, why is it important for me to knock still, even if it's cold outside and my effort is wasted?
And to prove to yourself that you can, even like you can knock and you can still even like the worst conditions.
Yes. So I go out, I decide to go and knock, and I sell 2 accounts. That's cool. Honestly, I'm disappointed. But at the same time, I'm reminding myself that arrival is not the goal. The output isn't the goal. This idea of selling a golden door or selling 1,000 accounts or getting on this other side of your best effort, like the outcome result is only good in so much as it serves you. Now, what I mean by that is that, yes, you should have something that you're shooting for. You should have a benchmark that you're shooting for. But should it be always the main focus as to why or how you're doing what you're doing? And the answer is absolutely no. No. And the reason why is because you can't always control your outcomes. You can't. But the best way to control the outcomes is to control what it is that you're doing. You have significantly more control over the inputs that you do, how many doors you decide to knock, the hours in which you knock, how hard you push, how many objections you strive to overcome, how you strive to overcome the objections, whether you're pleasantly persistent or if after talking to you, somebody never wants to talk to another door salesman again. All of that is within your control. The outcome is not always. Sometimes you have a good area, sometimes you don't. I have thoughts on that too, by the way. But if you guys are going to take life by the horns and really change yourselves into something that exudes confidence in a way where you really believe in yourself. And I'm not talking about cocky. I'm not talking about being like this. I'm not talking about being an able, but actually believing that you can do hard things and aligning what your thoughts are with your actions and like aligning self-belief, all that good stuff. All of that's within your control, and it comes at the cost of you focusing on your out or on your inputs. And it comes at the cost of effort. When it comes to some of these goals, there's a price that you have to pay that can't be negotiated with. I understood that. I understood that pretty quickly when it came to losing weight and when it came to this. So some of the things that you have to sacrifice, I actually visualized it that way. So I visualized comfortability as something that I need to place on this altar of sacrifice in order for me to get where I wanted to go. Comfortability is not an option. It's a non-factor. Do I like it? Yes. But am I going to get where I want to go if I only do it when I'm comfortable? No. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that at all. In fact, if I only do stuff when I'm comfortable, if I only apply effort from a place of comfort, that's really not applying effort at all. I'm going to be right down here at my natural state. Or I'm going to be going backwards. It's like you have a stop and go, or go, yeah, I just did it backwards. You have a stop and go type mentality rather than a continually engaged like mentality. Now, the continual engagement doesn't require perfection. Like I was saying, I don't want you guys to get hung up on this idea of perfection or chasing this version of yourselves that you guys can't really become like. But what it is that you guys are chasing is your best efforts. Now, when I say best efforts, I'm not talking about, I tried my best. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being able to look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, I gave my best that day. Now, if you guys deep down know that you've never been able to do that, I suggest you examine it. And the reason why I love sales and why I love this industry is because it's like one of the closest things. Like there's only two things in my life where I feel like I've been able to really examine myself. One of them was my mission, and the other is door to door. But I think that you guys, most of you that are like returned missionaries, you guys know that there's varying levels of missionaries. Something I didn't realize when I was a teenager, people are either engaged or they're not engaged. They either have their foot on the gas and they're trying to accomplish their goals and trying to become better, or they're not. It's the same in life. It's the same that way in anything in which, like it's the same that it's like, I'm getting my tongue twisted. It's like that with most tools or experiences that you can use to better yourself or to examine yourself. So I'll share one story of my 1500 account. How are we doing on time, Jaeger?
We're at 7:13.
Okay. Yeah, I'll share one story, okay? And then I do want to give you guys some actionable stuff that's a little bit less philosophical. I want to talk to you guys about switchovers because I am a switchover king. I'll tell you guys that. I'm really good at it. Really, really good at it. Okay, so with me, I had knocked in Oklahoma City for approximately 5 years at this point. How many of you guys have knocked in the same market year after year after year? It's not super common, but how many of you guys have? You have? Okay. Did you remember which areas you liked and didn't like? For sure. Yes, we get these preconceived notions based off of our experiences about which neighborhoods have the Karens in them, which neighborhoods may or may not have a lot of Punjabis in them, or how difficult it is to negotiate, or how friendly the HOA is, all those different things. Towards the very beginning of the summer, I realized, man, OKC is not that big of a market. And if I don't really maximize my usage of area, I'm gonna run out of area. And so the honest truth was, I felt like I needed to test this theory of effort. I felt like I needed to test this theory of effort because I still had a lot of limiting beliefs. There were a lot of areas in that market that I don't like. Like there's still freaking rude people today. Like they're still rude. Those areas still suck to knock in. But I knew that I needed to overcome those limiting self-beliefs. So there was one area in particular, in an area called Norman, Oklahoma, where OU is. They all think that they're better than everybody because it's the home of the Sooners, although they're really not that cool, in my opinion. And it was a bunch of older people. And I want you guys to understand why I think it's lame that they think of themselves this way. Like this is back in 2019. And so in Oklahoma City, if you had a house that was above $400,000 to like $600,000, you were balling. Like you had a mansion. I mean, it'd be nice if it was that way today. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have a house yet. I would love a house that's a mansion for that much. But anyways, they thought they were hot crap. And in my experience, the snootiest people are not the rich and they're not the poor. They're the upper middle class. And that's who I was talking about. They're the people that think that they're rich and have the ego to show it, even though they're really not. Anyways, so upper middle class, that's where I had some issues, specifically in this area. It wasn't like I had issues with them all the time, like that type of sale. But this area was weird. They were very Karen-esque. They were very like permits, like where's your permit? And even if you had it, they weren't very nice to you. So going back in time to year one, okay, I don't know where it is that I'm knocking. I'm kind of exploring with my team, figuring out which areas to knock, which areas not to knock. And as long as I know they can afford it, we're knocking it. So I take my team of like 10, 12 people there. I didn't have a big team. And we start knocking and we start getting complaints. Cops start coming and they start warning our sales reps, telling them to move. I'm like, fine, okay. I move them to the other side of the neighborhood. I try all the tactics to not have us completely move. So I move one person to the other side of where everybody else is knocking, but I don't move everybody. I keep doing that for 3-4 reps. And the time is going on, it keeps going, and nobody's making any sales. Nobody. We must have gotten Facebook blocked, like where there's a Facebook group amongst the whole neighborhood and they're all talking crap about us. I'm pretty positive that that's what was happening. So the rest of the day goes by. We're spinning our wheels, not a single sale, nothing. I managed to close one sale at the very end of the day, and they ended up canceling before they could get service the next day. I remember my business partner at the time calling me and telling me how disappointed he was in me, and basically called me kind of like a loser, and said that in his whole history of door knocking that he never had a team suck as much as we did. And he called me out on my leadership, which honestly, he wasn't incorrect to do. But I'll tell you guys, I avoided that area like the plague every year from then on. It's like you could look at our map on the stars where all of our customers were, and there was this big black hole where I would not take my reps. I was afraid of this area. I was afraid of this area. And so naturally, this idea of, you know what, it's all about my effort. I needed to test it. I needed to test it before everybody else came out. So in March, those first couple of weeks, I sold 100 accounts within the first 2 weeks. And then I sold another 100 accounts over the next 2 weeks. But after like 3 weeks, I figured out what my closing ratio was, and I realized that my numbers, basically I sold 1 out of every 2.85 to 3.25 people that I spoke to. That was basically the gist of what it was that I was selling. Now, to kind of explain that to you guys, for those of you guys who've knocked a long time, I was not one of those sales reps that could get to 100 doors in a day. I wasn't. I had a really hard time knocking more than 30 to 40 doors in a day, because once I would get people in front of me, I'd get them to talk to me. Not that they were mad at me. I wasn't like that kind of pushy salesman, but I just had a really high closing ratio. So I realized, all right, as long as my effort's consistent, this is what my closing ratio is. This is how I decided, this is how I'm going to quantify my success and quantify how tuned in my pitch is. This is why it's important to know what your pins are and like what your knocking metrics are. You should know the data of how many doors it takes for you to get a sale, how many decision makers it takes for you to get a sale, all those different metrics that we should know. You need to pay attention to that. The one that I paid attention to the most was pretty much how many people I had to speak to get a sale, regardless of whether they were the decision maker or not. And they were those numbers I just told you, 2.85 to 3.25. I realized something, that as long as my effort was consistent, the numbers would hold. Maybe they wouldn't hold completely true over the course of a day, but they would absolutely hold true over the course of days and weeks and months. And so for me, in order to take out the emotional ups and downs of sales, I kind of gamified it in my head and told myself, all right, the only way I'm going to get bothered is if at the end of the day, I look at how many people I spoke to and the ratio doesn't match. And if it doesn't match, I'm going to ask myself why. That's when I'll do some digging. But between now and then, I don't care. I'm just going to know that eventually the math's going to work out. So I'm going to push that rock as hard as I freaking can. Except for this one area. I was afraid, this area. So afraid that the morning that I went to go do it, I was throwing up. Like I had a lot of anxiety around this class. A lot. So I was super nauseous, didn't want to do it. But at the same time, knowing that if I didn't overcome this, there's no way I was going to sell 1,000 accounts. It was that big of a rock. It was like somebody chucked this big brick on this hill of effort that I'm trying to push up. And if I didn't get past it, I wouldn't get past it. So I went, and people started being rude to me. They started being rude. But within the first hour, I sold one. I kept going. People are rude. I sell another. I keep going. They're rude. I sell another. Until at the end of the day, I realized I've sold 12 accounts. That's a real story. Yeah, that really happened. There's some aspects of that summer where I look back at it and it seems like it was kind of unreal. That was one of those moments where I took that and I was able to stand on it forever. I still stand on that today. This idea that I don't care what people say to me in between the doors. People can tell me that they hate me, that I'm a loser, that I'm annoying, that they're going to leave me a 1-star review. Quite frankly, I don't give a shit. Because I know what my numbers are, and as long as my effort is consistent, and I'm doing what I like to do, which is be positive enough with people that even though they may not buy from me, they can't say that I was rude to them. That's the kind of salesman I always was, and I maintained that. Sometimes it was enjoyable because people expected me to be rude, and I just refused to be, and I knew that it bothered some people. So I enjoyed kind of like trolling them that way. But essentially, I learned that I can sell in any area. I can sell in any area. You could drop me off anywhere. As long as I can afford pest control, I'm going to sell at least 7 accounts that day. And that came not from like this aspect of like I had to earn that, is what I'm trying to say. I didn't walk into the building with this skill. I developed it over years, but the mentality aspect, I had to bleed for it. Really, like I really had to hurt. It really hurts. Everything that I earned when it comes to this was basically like my success has been sold to me at the price of my effort and my willingness to suffer longer. When it came to my 1,500 account year, guys, I'm telling you, my sales pitch did not go from a 300 level sales pitch to a 1,500 level sales pitch. Sales pitches don't make up differences like that. It's just not, it's not the way that it works. At that point, it's really about, are you willing to suffer long enough? Are you willing to push the rock long enough? And I told myself I'd push it as hard as I could from March until October. So after about a month, I realized I'm doing the math, figuring out how many people I'm knocking into each day. I realized the math holds. not only will I sell 1,000 accounts, I'll break the industry record. At the time, the industry record was 1,200 accounts. And this is before a lot of inflation happened. A lot. The average contract value on that time was like in the mid 400s. I don't remember. Maybe it was in the lower 400s. And so I was pushing to be the very first person ever to sell 1,000 accounts with a contract value above $500, which I know that sounds significantly less cool today. But that's what it was then. That's what it was then. So I told myself, you know what? If I can do it, I should do it, because it represents what's on the other side of my best effort from point A to point B, from March until October. And so I do what I did with the weight stuff. I started telling people about what my goal was, and I started putting stuff in place where I couldn't back out of it. That's when I started talking to Sam Taggart and told him what my goal was. Told him I was already 400 accounts deep, and it was like April. It was April, so I was on pace. He did this podcast with me, titled, I can't remember what the exact title was. Maybe it was like how to sell 1,500 accounts. And it was before I'd sold 1,500 accounts. So I was pretty nervous about it. Like I absolutely acknowledged that I had not arrived at my goal yet. And that if I did it, Sam would probably have to go back and adjust the title of his podcast that he did with me. So anyways, I just kept plugging along that whole entire year. And there were many other obstacles I had to go through. It was not like I made this decision and now it's just a matter of doing it. It wasn't that way. Now, over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be having trainings like this, where I go through the things that I had to push through in order to get from point A to point B. That's fatherhood right there. But guys, I'd love it if you guys came and listened to some of the other things. I'll tell you guys, I'm somebody that has severely underbranded myself, and I've not utilized social media how I should at all. I am one of the best that's ever done this ever, though. There's only two, actually, I think there's three people now that can claim they've sold more pest control in a year than I have in pest control contracts. And if we were to adjust for inflation, I do have to add this little caveat in there. The amount that I sold would be on par with some of the best that have ever done it. I'd have sold way more than $1 million. I think it would have been more like 1.2 or 1.3 million. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. So essentially, happiness is found in pushing that rock. Your goals, your success, you changing your life is found on the other side of you continually pushing that rock. And one thing I do want to add, although in life, it's true that this goes on for forever. It's okay to take this idea of pushing as hard as you possibly freaking can and just applying it to a season in your life. I don't want you guys to think that because I'm talking about doing it forever, that it's unattainable, it's unrealistic. It doesn't have to be. You can have seasons of your life in which you do this and where you're still pushing the rock a little bit, but maybe you're not pushing it as hard as you possibly can. And that's okay. Because the truth is that big leaps and bounds, they do happen more through sprints. It is a marathon, and the marathon never ends. But you can sprint and then slow down a little bit. So is what I'm saying making sense? Sorry, I know that,
Essentially, you're climbing a mountain, hitting a new valley, and then you're climbing another mountain.
yes. Now I do want to do a little bit of time for some Q&As. So if anybody has any questions, you guys are welcome to ask. Yes, Mason.
So that area that you went through, it was like really tough for you?
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, so I'm the type of person that like this last summer was my first full summer. And I honestly, I could honestly say I'm like full walls to the wall, did everything I possibly could, but technically I wasn't the best, obviously. But what would you say is like, when you went into that area, when you had to, kind of be people that were rude or whatever, what would you say tactically you did to diffuse those type of people, like your type of personality?
Ben. Okay, so I have an answer for this. For those of you guys that have heard my podcast or my podcast with Sam, I had a trick. And I would use a picture of my dog. So when it comes to breaking the ice, I have a philosophy in sales. I do want to let you guys know that there's a lot of different ways to do this. Okay. And I'm not saying that my way is the only way. I do think that my way is the best way, but I do believe in getting people to like you. I do. I do think that instead of bulldogging people, you should use persuasion to get people to understand this value exchange that you're trying to sell. Essentially, sales, what it is, it's an agreement between two parties where you're selling something, a service, and they're agreeing or not agreeing that it's worth what it is that you're charging. And then keeping it is a representation of the value exchange, or them not keeping it, or them buying it or not buying it. How are we doing on time, Yeager?
7:30, but we do got a question from, one of the people.
Okay, I can't remember where I was at. I just totally lost myself.
You're talking about value proposition versus.
And okay, so essentially you need to break the ice. I was going down like a tangent. You need to break the ice. You need to get people to like you. If you're not a likable person, try to be likable.
Make yourself human.
Yeah, essentially, I try to find anything I possibly can to connect with that person in any way that I can. That way, for a split moment, I'm talking about microseconds. If somebody has a dog that comes and is barking, you guys know what I'm talking about. The dog won't shut up. And you're trying to talk to the person, and they're kind of hiding behind the door, and they're like, oh, my dog, and they don't want to come out. What I would say is, look, I totally get it. This is my dog. He's honestly a horrible guard dog, but I get it. And so that right there buys me some seconds in which their wall's coming a little bit down, and they see, hey, this guy owns a dog, and he understands. Now, you guys might be tempted to think, yeah, it doesn't work that way, but it actually does. It actually does work that way. And if it doesn't, it's because you're not saying it right. So because it works for me just about every single time. And I'm not saying that I get everybody to like me, I don't. But the people that I could get to like me. And most of the time when I sell somebody, when you do it this way, when you master likability on the front end and through the middle of your pitch and on the back end, that's when you can go into a neighborhood. Nobody knows you. They may not be friendly initially. They might have walls up. You've mastered your craft when you can get them to lower their walls, invite you in, buy your product, and then give you dinner afterwards. And there's no better feeling than that. I do think that in the world that we're in today, bulldogging people and just getting people, ramming them into this freaking sales funnel and boxing them in with resolve, ace, close over and over and over and over again without the flair of persuasion being maxed out, the likability being maxed out. I think a lot of people make sales today where people will resent them after. Because you will make sales like that. You will get to a point where you're so good with your words and your sales pitch in the process of resolve, ace, closing that you can sell people when they don't like you. I've seen it. I've done it. I did it way early on in my sales career, and I think that a lot of people do it that way. But they will cancel on you, and it's honestly not a fun way to do sales. But hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got two, Austin and Alexander. Let's talk about those switchovers.
Okay. Before I do that, does anybody else have one more question before I go over switchovers?
What was the average amount of time you spent with each customer?
I honestly don't remember, but I would say it ranged anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah.
We also have one more from Jared Gamble. How did you get past feeling burnt out? Or did you ever experience that?
Oh, I absolutely experienced that. So when it came to that, I experienced burnout in two different spots of my sales journey that year. One of them was at 750 accounts where I realized, holy crap, I'm only halfway there. And I don't really want to do this again. And then again, towards the very end where I had my last 200, 300 sales. And what I realized about burnout was that burnout for me happened when I started to get too loose with the things that were in my control. I stopped focusing as much on holding on tight to my inputs. And I was beginning to worry about my outputs. Like I'm losing pace. I'm losing pace. Like there's not enough time in the summer for me to hit my goal. When reality is, I've experienced feelings like that every summer. I think every single sales rep here has recognized that there's a gap between what they were doing and where they wanted to be at some point in the summer. But the truth is, worrying about that specific thing, does it do you any good at all? No. A lot of times when you do, it makes you slow down even more. And you kind of have a pity party, or you severely lower your goal. When the truth is, oftentimes it's not the goal that needs lowering, it's your commitment to your inputs. That's what needs a readjustment. So, and really, there's no magicalness around this. You just focus hard enough on your inputs and put your head down and keep moving forward, even though it hurts. And eventually you stop realizing how much it hurts. And then you're no longer in a slump. But that's the way you get past slumps. Okay, we ready for switchovers? Where's the eraser? Where?
I think Noah was throwing it around.
Hold on one second, everybody. You want to go away? No. I'm going to preach. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys how I do switchovers. It may not fit exactly with the companies that you currently sell for, but it is what it is. I use the angles that are given to me. So number one, when it comes to switchovers, you need to ask yourself, what angle can I take when I'm talking to these people? Why would they want to use me versus somebody else? So for me, I've always been smaller, local, and family owned. Which are angles that, to be candid with you guys, just about every other door knocking company you can't really compete with when I do it right. And I know that there's companies like this in the areas that you guys knock in where the house looks like garbage, absolute garbage. But because they like the technician, it's really hard to get them to switch. How many of you guys have run across houses like that? Yeah, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. House looks like trash, but because they like Steve, they'll never switch. So there's a couple things that you can use. Number one, humor. Be careful with this. Otherwise, you could say a joke that comes across offensive. So there was one time where a guy told me, he's like, I don't know, man. My wife, she just really likes the technician, Steve. And I jokingly, at this point, I built up enough rapport where I could joke with him and kind of push him a little bit. Like, come on, man. You know that you're getting a better deal. You know that we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And I can't remember if he was getting a better rate, and it's not going to be that much more. But to top it off, the one thing that I'll do to make it all make sense for you, I promise you, I will send you the ugliest technician every single time. That way your wife's not going to like him. Or just something like that. I said something to that effect. It actually worked. And I closed the sale. So what I'm saying is you do have to be careful because that could have been offensive. But I built enough rapport that I was able to get away with it and it closed the deal. So when it comes to switchovers, so humor is important. And so is building rapport. Now, the reason why you want to build out rapport is so you can push significantly harder without the perception of being pushy. Okay? So building rapport, getting friendly with them, honestly, that's a skill of persuasion. And if you guys haven't mastered that, the truth is that you haven't fully mastered your craft. Our job isn't to be somebody that just annoys the crap out of people and pushes them down the sales funnel where we bully them into buying and signing on the dotted line. You know you're doing good at this job and that you're on the right track if you've ever had somebody offer you a job after they didn't buy from you. A lot of times it's like a mattress company or something. I don't know how many times I've had something like that happen to me, or they want you to sell insurance for them. So if somebody offers you a job, or they invite you in for dinner after you sell them, you know you're doing it right. Okay. That's the kind of attitude and mentality you should keep with you, regardless of whether they buy or they don't buy. Because the truth is, when it comes to this, it's a base level thing that's very important in switchovers, because you need to understand what it is that you're competing against. If you're competing against this, okay, if you're competing against me or a large national company, or a national door-to-door company, or a small door-to-door company, what you're competing against is the same regardless of who's doing it. And that's that you're competing with 3 different points of contact with that customer. The first, usually there's a salesman. Number 2, there's an office staff that they deal with if they ever happen to call in or interact with the business in any way aside from a technician. And that's the third, the technician. A lot of times, and I can speak on this as an owner, a lot of times people will get their house serviced when they're not even home. So it's safe to assume that over half the time, they're not interacting with the technician. And when they are, the technician's maybe there 20 minutes, and he's not sitting and chatting with them the whole time. He's with them for maybe 5 minutes, 2 or 3 times a year. Now, this is what you're competing against. And you're trying to get them to like you more than Steve. Okay. Now, sometimes it's an uphill battle. Sometimes it's not a battle at all, and they don't care about Steve. But you don't think about it that way, so you don't really get them to try to like you. So the other thing, in any neighborhood that you're ever in, when you're knocking, if you're in pest control, odds are you have competition, door knocking competition. There's a very specific type of person that buys from door to door. And you want to know what one thing that they all have in common is, aside from buying door to door? That they'll probably buy from door to door again. So it's really just a matter of you thinking to yourself, am I better? Am I more personable than the technician they deal with on a regular basis? Am I more personable than the sales rep that sold for them? For me, that gave me a lot of confidence, especially if they're pushing the Sam Rock up a hill for months. I knew that regardless of wherever I sold, the odds of me being able to be more personable, more likable, more pleasantly persistent, that I'm not going to be able to be competed with in that way. So that's the framework that we want to operate within, okay? So, but when it comes to storytelling, I don't want people to lie, okay? I'm going to tell you how I do it, because these are the angles that I can take. I'm usually smaller. I'm local, I was, now we're growing, and I can't really say that anymore, but we are family owned, because I'm involved my whole family in this. So the story you want to tell is the story of David versus Goliath. Now, why is it important to tell a story? Because you want to be able to create a story where you can tell the differences between somebody else and you, and have you be the good guy without overtly attacking the other company. Now, some of you guys might not believe this, but when it comes to my switchover tactics, I never outright speak negative about another company. I don't. I've never had to. I've never had to, because I use humor, rapport, and the power of storytelling to switch people over. So say somebody, I'm going to use this as an example. Let's say I am knocking on a door and somebody tells me that they have some generic large national door knocking company. Those are my favorite. I have about an 80% chance of switching over another door-to-door company. I know that because that's what my numbers show, and I really just enjoy it. I'm really good at telling the story against them, and it doesn't have anything to do with what they do versus what I do. It has to do with the stories. So somebody tells me that they're with generic company A that knocks door to door, that's significantly larger than me. I'll say something to the effect of, hey, honestly, nothing negative to say about those guys. What I will say though, is that the biggest difference between me and them, there's two things. Number one, they're one of the largest pest control companies in the world. I'll usually know, this is me talking to you guys. I'll usually know where they're at on the PCT 100 or how vaguely how large the company is. And I use that data against them. I'll say something to the effect of, they're like a $400 million pest control company. So they're actually one of the most successful in the world. Whereas with us, we're just a small local family owned company. So I'm tugging on heartstrings right here. Okay. I'm starting to tug on heartstrings. I'm getting ready for that. Now, one thing I will say that you will notice that's different. Okay. And this isn't because of anything that they choose to do or not to do. This is just a reality of what happens when it comes to scaling your business. Sometimes companies that large, they're a victim of their own size. And what I mean by that is that at that size, it's impossible to hire all A+ players. At some point, you have so many customers that you really just have to throw butts in seats just so you can get the account serviced. And unfortunately, sometimes that affects culture, and that's just kind of what happens with large national brands. The thing that I think you like the most with us, though, the biggest difference is that because we're smaller, we can be a lot pickier with who we hire. And the standards that we hold are a lot easier to enforce because we don't have thousands of employees that we're trying to enforce the standard over. And I'll say something like, does that make sense? And so I'll get them to agree with me that that makes sense. And then I'll just keep going and going. One thing I will ask from there, I get them to agree with me that it makes sense. Makes sense that Goliath is Goliath. And that there's inherent issues with that. From there, I'll say, okay, now, just out of curiosity, why did you guys originally get them? Right now, I'm problem finding. Problem finding. They'll tell me, oh, we had ants and the guy knocked on the door. I'll say, if you guys aren't unique in that, there's been a lot of ants in the neighborhood. I think that one of the things that makes us different is how we treat for ants. I'll speak a little bit about that. But then I go back and I essentially what I'm looking for is I'm looking for pop-ups. They're telling me ants. Okay, now I know ants, something that I can focus on. I'll see if there's anything else there, any other pop-ups. And then from there, I find out when's the last time they came out. Now, the reason why this is relevant is not because it's going to make any difference over whether I'm going to sell them or not. At this point, when it comes to switchovers, this is my philosophy. I would probably have already brought up what the recurring price is, but I withhold the initial. So, like initially, they're like, "Yeah, I have nothing negative to say about Apple. They're not bad guys." From a pricing standpoint, really not super far off. So at this point, I'll ask, "Okay, you guys need some for ants, and what do you guys pay?" I say it just like that with my intonations. At this point, they can tell that I'm a nice guy. I use humor and rapport. But if I were to just knock on the door and ask them, "Who are you guys using and what do you pay?" What is their response going to be to that? Their walls are going to be up. They're going to be like, "Why the hell do you want to know? Why does it matter to you? I'm not using you." But if I approach it, I tell them, "I'm David, they're Goliath. Just out of curiosity, what are you guys giving?" They're significantly more likely to answer that question, aren't they? So I use rapport building, humor to collect information that I can use against the company without attacking the service or directly attacking anybody in particular, just acknowledging facts of operational excellence or ineptitude, which is that the larger you scale, the harder it is to control variables like what a technician does or doesn't do. That's just the truth. So because my angle is smaller, local family, I can attack that directly. And the truth is that any door-to-door company can use that angle. Maybe not the local or family, but you can use a smaller angle against companies like Orkin, Permanent, Aspen, meaning large regional companies that are significantly larger than the company you're working with. like in that area. Massey runs the show in Florida, or in the Southeast in general. There's companies that are like that in other areas of the US. But I figured out when they came. I figured out when they came and say they told me that they had just come recently. My first go-to is not to give them a free service. It's finally to bring up the initial. So actually, sorry, rewind. I figured out when was the last time and how long. I'm trying to gauge if you're in a contract or not. And based off of whichever company it is, I'll assume whether or not they have a 1 or 2 year contract. But say they're not in contract anymore, they've been with me for 3 years, they're paying $129 a quarter, and they either just came or they're getting ready to come in like 2 weeks. If they're getting ready to come, what I'll say is like, look, normally my initial is $399. Why don't I get you guys taken care of? I know that you're gonna see a difference when it comes to the quality and the amount of care that we put into taking care of you guys as a customer versus a larger national brand. I just know it. So if we can get you guys taken care of, I'll just get you guys done at the same rate as our normal customers, and I'll drop that $399 initial all the way down to $129. And then I just sit there and nod my head and I don't say anything. I don't like keep nodding my head forever. Eventually I just kind of stop and I just look at them. It's awkward, but at that point, the next person who talks loses. Like, and it's not gonna be me. So they either say yes or no. And at that point, you guys know what to do. To resolve case close over and over and over and over again. And because I've built enough rapport, I can be kind of friendly in how I do it. Ultimately, whether they buy or they don't buy from me, I want them to have a positive interaction with me. And so that's kind of how I leave it. But if they don't accept that and they've been recently, I'm not above doing a free initial. You guys have to remember where I came from. I started when I first started selling, people were doing free initials and $79 quarterlies. So it's been kind of hard for me to get rid of that because it's a tool that works. But I would go from a normal price to a discounted price to another discounted price and then free if I had to. But I am going to push that mark. Okay. That's essentially how I do switchovers. The biggest takeaway from that is storytelling. You need to find your angle and find a story to frame yourself as the good guy. That's essentially it at its core. And that way you don't have to get into all the details of, well, yeah, they go up 3 feet, we go up 4 feet. Like, dude, nobody cares about that crap. Nobody cares about that crap. You think that they're out there looking at the ground to see how wet it is and how far out it goes? They don't care at all. Doesn't mean anything to them. And truthfully, from a pest control standpoint, it usually doesn't mean anything as far as the service goes either. It doesn't. So a lot of how you guys think pest control services work do not actually work the way that we've been simply taught to sell it. But I won't go into that right now. But is there any other final questions? No?
We're at 7:53.
All right, you guys. This is the conclusion of that, our first training. I'll let you guys know when the next one is. But thank you guys for coming. How many people were on here?
We had at the max 24. So we had 22 at the max.
Nice.
Thank you. Thanks, brother. That was fire.
Who's saying that?
Uh,
I do.
you got Jared Gamble, Justin, Jared Gamble,
Especially
Gillian Sullivan, Pedro Severino.